And before we jump into the session, I also wanted to introduce our solution experts that have joined us today and that are going to be driving the conversation. So, Natalia, if I could kindly have you introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Natalia. I'm the specialist technical account manager at AWS, and my specialty is cost optimization. We actually have a team of specialists that work with enterprise support customers on different domains, and we run operations reviews with them and cost optimization reviews on a deep dive level. So the majority of my time, I pretty much answer questions about cost optimization to customers. I run different educational sessions and I run reviews and anything that has to do with kind of FinOps culture and cost efficiency. When customers have enterprise support, they often come to me and my team for help. So hopefully I'll be able to share some interesting insights today.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Natalia. Omar, if you could kindly introduce yourself, please.
Yes. Hi, my name is Omar. I'm a principal engineer at Zesty for the past, I think, 2.5 years. Before that, I was a consultant, mainly in the SRE DevOps areas for roughly 6 years. So a big part of my work was obviously FinOps as part of building infrastructure and ops. And today, we'll touch on what Zesty does later on, but we're involved in also in the FinOps industry and being able to save costs for our customers. And personally, I'm involved with building our storage solution for Kubernetes. We can touch on that later. That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Omar. And Dina, if I could kindly have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I'm Dina Brown. I head the product marketing department at Zesty.
Thanks for joining us, Dina. Dina, can you also give us a brief background in terms of Zesty? What is it that Zesty does?
Yeah, sure. So Zesty really is essentially a FinOps solution that helps organizations to be more adaptable to changing business needs by making their cloud infrastructure more dynamic. So we do this by helping them automatically scale their cloud resources to meet application demands in real time. And this helps cloud infra teams slash cloud costs, but it also helps them maintain better application performance and generally minimize the hassle of managing infra.
Okay. Excellent. Great, thanks. And I'm sure that Dina is going to give us some more information in terms of what Zesty does towards the later part of our session. So I wanted to quickly jump into our roundtable discussion. I wanted to ensure that this is going to be conversational as much as possible. We want it to be as engaging as possible. So I definitely want to ask all of you a lot of questions and get your views and inputs as well. But I actually wanted to open the session out with a question to Natalia. Based on your experience, Natalia, where do you see market adoption of FinOps solutions that are embedded with AI?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. So you see right now, everyone, regardless of the industry, of the company size, or what the company is doing, everyone is focusing on cloud cost optimization right now. If you're familiar with this report, so according to the Flexera 2023 State of the Cloud report, cloud cost management and cost optimization is actually #1 priority for organizations of all sizes. So to be fair, that's what we actually see, let's say within AWS when we work with our customers, doesn't matter market segment or the size, everyone right now is looking for ways to be more efficient with their cloud spending, either through tools or through changing their maybe company culture and processes and mechanisms. The thing is that right now, to stay competitive, organizations, they have to innovate at a much faster pace than ever before. And, instead of spending time and resources managing bulky reports or doing some sort of manual management of resources, companies now choose to, simplify essentially, and they are looking for tools that will help them stay on top of their cloud spend, and just generally make their cloud bill more predictable and improve cost transparency so that they would understand what they're spending on. But also some of the more popular features in terms of where AI can be used is forecasting and budgeting. Those are some big topics that we see amongst our customers now.
Interesting. And what kind of trends are you seeing in their adoption?
So I'd say, well, everyone is more or less familiar with the AIOps as a term or as a concept, because it's more about, it's about the importance of automation and automating processes and mechanisms inside the organization, and which should free up the time of engineering teams and let them focus on what matters and let them focus on tasks that bring some, value add to the company. So while everyone, nobody's really doubting the importance of operational excellence and using AI in operations generally. However, what I see is that a lot of organizations, they sometimes misunderstand the meaning of FinOps as as a collection of practices or as a collection of cultural changes that they might potentially need to make in their organization. So this is, I'd say, these are the trends that while the AIOps side is more, the companies understand it much better, the FinOps side is still, while it's popular right now and companies are looking into that area, it's still sometimes misunderstood. Because customers often look at it from the perspective of simply cost savings, simply reducing their bill, instead of looking at it from the side of efficiency. And I'd say some of the main barriers or challenges that we see in terms of adopting, FinOps culture overall inside the organization, generally would be no executive sponsorship. So if the leadership of the organization doesn't think that this is important, then it will be very difficult for engineering teams to actually implement anything, right? And be more cost aware. Another thing is no ownership of goals. So yeah, while we talk about cost optimization and we say oh, you can, optimize here or there, we rarely talk about it from the perspective of goals and KPIs and setting those targets and saying okay, so what do we mean cost optimization? What do we mean by this? And how do we ensure that we are efficient, right? And third problem is often that there's lack of time and resources to actually implement the optimization. So this is where a lot of the tools, potentially tools that are utilizing AI, can be very helpful to avoid, kind of manual admin work that engineers, I'm sure, don't like spending time on. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to open the floor out to a question, and anybody that wants to take this can respond. Is anyone currently using any AI-based tools that are helping you optimize your cloud spend? If yes, what is it? And would you like to share some background about it? It's a question open to the group, anybody that wants to answer.
Sure. Natalia touched on a very important point, because we probably have all dealt with FinOps and trying to improve or reduce our costs. But having that layer of AI is what tips the peak point, if you could say, because that's the difference between not being optimized and efficient in your work and being and doing something well. I'll give an example for something close to my heart. Managing commitments within AWS, for example, you can commit to a certain period of time and some of your resources and get a discount on some of them, right? You can do that with EC2, RDS, Elasticache, I think, and others. But if you put an engineer and redo the same iteration every day, count the EC2 instances, make different decisions, not only you're wasting time, engineering hours, you're probably not focused on innovation. It's not efficient, right? And the decisions you make are not always the best. You're probably using some kind of a spreadsheet or something, while in the same time, you could have used an AI system. That doesn't have to be a commercial solution. There are tons of great open source solutions if you just go on GitHub and search for them. But the idea is having some kind of layer helping you with the decisions, because again, back to the same examples, with commitments, you're taking some kind of a risk. So you have to make some kind of computation and then make a decision, and not just thinking or trying to, just jot down a few lines and then based on that, making the decision that can cost thousands of dollars for your company in the next 1 or 3 years. So we do that, but again, you don't have to use a certain solutions. You can use whatever other layer, but this is what AI, or where AI comes into play for me. It helps me with making long-term decisions by accumulating data, running some analysis or computations, and then outputting a decision.
Great. I think that's pretty good input, Omar. Does anybody have any questions around that with regards to Omar's inputs out there?
So, Omar, if I understand correctly, right, as I started, I told you, right, AI is what triggered me to be here. We understand FinOps, we know what we do, like which are the major contributors, etc. So, the way you and Natalia explained, it looks more like a forecasting data, which with the help of AI, you are generating based on the old data and take decisions, right? Or is it like AI, or are you guys using it for anything else? Is it purely a data forecasting to get more accuracy on the future usage so that decisions can be made? Is it what AI is involved here, or is it really anything more than that, from the automation or any cost optimization? Like what are the other tools available in AWS, right? So what's your view? Like, is it, as the way I understood, it's more forecasting stuff based on data is what AI comes here?
So yeah, again, I can only touch on what I know and I have experience with. Specifically for commitments, yes, this is forecasting that's based on historical data, being able to run some statistic analysis and making decisions. That is exactly what we do, at least, and other solutions will do the same. But it helps you with forecasting, sure. Another area I'm experienced with is storage, because today you have different storage solutions. Not all of them are elastic and can support you over time being able to grow or shrink. The applications are changing, the requirements are changing. So that's another type of decision. You need some kind of AI in the middle to help you, because each and every one of us, I think most of us are engineers. We can all find a server, go in, add a block storage, maybe expand the file system or shrink it. We can't do that manually, but it's just not efficient. And deciding where to do that, when to do that, maybe decide on the size of block that needs an addition. That's basically the same, looking at historical data and making decisions based on that. So back to the example of storage, you need to make a decision of how much do you want to grow? Is the trend really spiky now because I'm bombarded with data and I need huge volumes? So while I can do the manual operation on my own because I'm an engineer and fine, I know the way, maybe I don't want to do it in 3 a.m. and maybe I don't really know in a split of a second to make a decision of how much storage do I need to add. So this is just another example of something you can surely spend a day or two and write a script to do it for you. It's just not going to be as smart as a system that can take the historical data and make the decision. I hope that answers the question.
So Natalia, this might be for you. Since you have the bigger view of like multiple customers, you have been with the AWS point of view, right?
Yeah.
So do you see like many of the customers using this in the FinOps today? Because
So,
why I'm asking this, right? Sorry, let me come. Why I'm asking this is every instance case is different. Okay, so it depends upon the load, number of customers coming in, etc. So what's the view, or is there any great case study for this?
yeah. So yeah, from my perspective, I can tell how customers are using the AWS native tools. So, and this is usually from AWS side, the first thing that we of course recommend to use some of our native tools. So it depends really what customer is trying to achieve. So we talked about like forecasting, let's say. Usually what we see from forecasting perspective in FinOps space is like customers want to know, let's say, how are they supposed to have like a yearly budget? How do they know how much each team potentially might be spending in the next year? But these decisions, they can't be made, just manually by looking at the bill. So we have some of the, let's say, forecasting features in tools like Cost Explorer. As an example. So customers might be using those. And then, there are other additional tools that can help, like tagging. Let's say if the resources are tagged in a certain way, then, the forecasting features that we might have available, they will be just a bit better. And another thing, so it's like, as I said, so it depends really what customers are trying to achieve. Generally in FinOps space, the needs are relatively similar. So customers want to know whether they stay within the budget, and they want to know whether they are utilizing AWS services efficiently. So for those, this is where they use some of our services, such as, for example, cost anomaly detection, also from cost perspective, so that they could see whether the trend, how their usage is going and how much they are spending, whether they are going out of ordinary on certain days, maybe. So let's say cost anomaly detection feature in Cost Explorer, it's also using like a AI and ML mechanisms to analyze customers' past data, and then let's say throw alerts and kind of evaluate whether certain spikes that happen in the environment, whether they are an anomaly or maybe it's actually normal. And then there is a way to sort of train that kind of model over time so that it will throw this information it will be more relevant to your usage. Or another tools like Compute Optimizer that is providing recommendations on right sizing on EC2 and EBS volumes and Lambda. So it is. So we, like as AWS, we use certain algorithms that help make those decisions based on the historical metrics that we see in customers' environment, and then the tool will provide recommendations on what to do. So this is like what I can tell. Like most customers that they use these features, a lot of these features are free. And they are AWS native, so they essentially are within the account, within their organization. If that makes sense.
When I'd asked that question about, anyone using AI-based tools for optimizing your cloud spend, I did notice a few shaken heads out there in terms of not using AI-based tools. So I think time to address the elephant in the room. Has there been reluctance within your organization to adopt AI-based automated tools due to concerns of losing manual control over configurations? Or why haven't you started that yet? Maybe if I could come to Rick.
For us, it's really around finding the right tool. We're in more of an infancy from our AWS FinOps perspective. Most of our environment is within AWS. So for us, it's really more around building blocks around configuration management and more efficient configuration and what that's going to look like over time, more so than actually adopting tools in particular to look at it. So we're kind of watching what other groups are doing within the industry to try to build in those efficiencies as we go. But I don't think the reluctance is really around any type of fear of loss of manual control. I think for us, it's not really having the definition of what controls we actually need to determine which AI platform may be helpful for us.
Sure. Chris, do you want to come in and possibly share a perspective there?
We're not actually using anything yet, because much like was previously said, we're on the lookout for something. We're trying to find something that gives us more than we currently already have. We work very closely with AWS, I guess, people that do the same kind of role as Natalia, to help with our optimization. But we haven't found anything that does anything better. There's a lot of products that say they do, but when you really dig into it, they don't. So yeah, still looking, trying to get insights from folks.
Can I ask then? So those products, they don't sort of fit for purpose, right? So they don't really fit your use case, like what you are trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, all of the the obvious stuff like right sizing and RIs and savings plans and the, as you say, anomaly detection, your forecasting tools, all that kind of stuff. We get slightly more in-depth reports from AWS on a periodic basis. We spend like 50 million a year with AWS, so they kind of look after us. So again, we haven't found much. I dare say there are certain products that do things more effectively in a more automated fashion in certain areas, but I often find that they're aimed at companies who are maybe not as tech savvy as we're a cybersecurity software development company, right? We've got a lot of smart people. A lot of these tools are aimed at companies that don't know any better and don't have the in-house development skills to to automate certain things. So yeah, just still looking.
Maybe worth looking at the development of some custom solutions, even building it potentially on AWS using AWS services, but with some customization. If you have engineers and resources who can.
Yeah, we've done a lot of that. All the obvious stuff like making sure that accounts and resources in accounts aren't running out of hours or triggering alerts when they're underutilized. Right sizing. We've got pretty much fully automated, elastic scaling and a lot of services to avoid that kind of thing. So again, I know that we're not doing enough. I just haven't found anything else that does more.
Omar, I wanted to kind of come back to you and possibly ask you what you've been seeing as one of the biggest hindrances for organizations to adopt AI-based automated tools based on your experience.
Are you referring to the same question about reluctance to integrate an AI solution?
Yes.
Yeah. We have seen a few of those, and I think it's mostly about trust. I mean, as an engineer, if I did implement a few tools, I was kind of reluctant to begin with, because every time you mix in just the term AI, there's a feeling of something with the brain starting to perform actions within my infrastructure. And that's not something I necessarily want, right? Because when it's a recommendation system, it's fine. It's a text output and I can make decisions based on it. And when there's something active within the system, I mean, it can be a problem. So personally, I have a checklist of how I go about implementing such a solution and how I monitor it, or what I expect from it in terms of monitoring and operations. But yeah, I think it's mostly about trust. And if you do it gradually and you're able to run some kind of a dry run to begin with, and then gradually implement it through the environments long before it reaches production, then you gain trust with the solution you chose. And then you can see it doing whatever it does, whether that's commitment storage, even logs and security analysis and beyond analysis. AI is everywhere. Even within the security sphere, you have tools today literally performing operations within the infrastructure, closing firewalls, IPs, ports, stuff like that. And if you don't have trust, especially with security, but definitely with your costs, that can be a problem. So that's something we at Zesty, we can try to mitigate by providing the right process for adoption.
Sure. So obviously, I think the next natural question is, Natalia, if I can come to you, what are some of the best practices that SaaS engineers should follow when using AI-based tools for FinOps?
So it's interesting that Omar kind of touched on the topic when we talked about the reluctance. He touched on the topic of trust, and we actually see this amongst customers that the main reason or problems that they have on their whole kind of cost optimization journey is generally when it comes to implementation of any recommendations. And presumably, if there was like an AI tool that was able to implement those recommendations and make decisions for you, it would simplify things, of course. But yeah, sometimes the problem is still oh, we don't want any automation to take any action in our environment because they are afraid that something will go wrong. But what we do in AWS in terms of how we suggest best practices, and this is pretty much a mandatory thing for our enterprise support customers that we usually do. We encourage customers to make sure that their environment is well architected. We have this whole, many of you probably are familiar about the well-architected framework. It's a collection of principles and best practices how to design your workloads in such a way so that they are, reliable, secure, have high performance, and also cost optimized, of course. And we, let's say, run this well-architected reviews with our customers. We run them across like multiple workloads with different teams, like if it's, let's say, big organizations, because we want to be sure that nothing is missing. So usually what happens then when customers go through this process, they become more like they trust their environment more. If they, let's say, they know, okay, we are building it in a right way, so there's no way that some tools could make some changes or problems for us because for whatever reason, let's say that tool has the permissions that it's not supposed to have. And if customers know that all of this collection of design principles, that they are in order and they follow the right design principles, then they are just more confident in their own environment, and thus then they can choose the right tools because they're confident that those tools will not like break anything. But I'd say, speaking about the well-architected, I think when we are talking about automation and maybe like generally, the AI tools that some engineers might be using, it's important to pay attention to the operational excellence pillar, because this is the pillar that talks about people and processes and all of those automation, processes and best practices, how ideally we want customers to how we want to encourage customers to operate their environment. So that's how we usually suggest where to start from. But maybe Omar has a few more ideas to follow up on.
Sure. I mean, I have my own process, which I can talk about. And everything we have is deployed within AWS. So obviously we try to follow the guidelines. Personally, when I try to adopt an AI tool, just because I'm building the same trust as someone that's adopting something as an engineer, and as an engineer that builds something and is trying to kind of integrate it with our customers. So my process is always start with a well-architected environment, but completely isolated. And I will usually require some kind of a dry run functionality from the tool, so I can only see recommendations or just know the actions, but in an informative level, without performing any remediation or actions like performed physically. And once I have that, I'd go for tools that provide some kind of monitoring functionality. The more I have, the more information I can work with and obviously monitor the system. I'd expect it to be able to send alerts and metrics to tools that I work with, monitoring tools that I work with. And once I build the initial trust, I'll go to a staging environment or something around that. And then I'd run that for a month or two, or a period of time that makes sense for me to understand whether that performs as well as I expect it to. And there are no, funny things going on. And then when I have that, probably discussing it with other leaders in the organization, will progress all the way to production, assuming there's no pressure to do it very, very quickly. It'll probably on a span of a few months, 6 or 7 months, and then we go all the way to production and we can let it run there. Preferably to begin with, I think a lot of tools today can offer you, it can run on a subset of resources. So I think Natalia mentioned the ability to have tags on Amazon, all of our resources. So that was something we're trying to do. And if I can run a tool that only touches a subset of the resources in production based on a tag or something like that, that's very helpful. And then I can monitor the behavior on those resources. So it's kind of an isolated group. And then I grow from there until I get to full functionality over my entire production. And I do that with everything, not just with FinOps, security, logs, any kind of AI management tool that I run.
It seems like those operational excellence principles, they apply across platforms, and it doesn't matter whether it's security or FinOps or
yes,
or other. Yeah.
Right. So what are some areas of cloud infra that you think lend themselves well for costs to be managed by AI-based solutions? Natalia, if you could possibly shed some light on that.
You mean like for example in AWS, like which services could like benefit or could help, like could be of additional help to the tools?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think probably CloudWatch will be the top of the list, because CloudWatch service has so many features around, like even monitoring, what Omar mentioned, especially when it comes to metrics, and like you can set it up pretty much the whatever way you want, and you can have like custom metrics. Like there are certain default metrics in CloudWatch that are free, and then of course for some custom metrics you probably will be charged additionally. However, a lot of the partner, we call them third-party tools. A lot of the partner tools, of AWS partners, they actually utilize CloudWatch metrics within our customers' environments. To then they analyze those metrics, and then they sort of provide those recommendations based on those CloudWatch metrics. So this is probably the top of the list. CloudWatch can be also used for an automation. So then based on the output of those metrics, then you can have like a Lambda function that will trigger based on a set of rules and then make an action. So you can go from the analysis and monitoring and recommendation side, you can go to that actual implementation using automation. And then again, you can either create your own scripts, or you can utilize like what we call third-party tools that essentially take that data, analyze it, and then provide those recommendations or potentially take action on your behalf. So that will be the first one that I can certainly say that everyone is using. And I mentioned, I think, some of the other services that we have, like we have Compute Optimizer, and we have like right sizing recommendations, right? And the cost anomaly detection. So I don't know that many, let's say, third-party tools or partner tools who might be utilizing the data from this AWS native tools, but at least within the AWS space. So those are the services that we on our side provide, and customers are utilizing them quite often.
Sure, thanks. Omar, anything that you wanted to add in there?
Yeah, that's kind of it's pushing me towards my comfort zone, because we're one of those third-party partners that Natalia was talking about. So obviously our expertise is providing the AI layer to help you with planning your commitments. So that's basically forecasting. And we do the same with storage planning. So you can run whatever type of storage you want, regardless of size, and we'll continuously assess using our model the trend in which you're either reading, writing, are you using your storage space efficiently or not? And then based on that, we can extend and shrink disk capacity. So that's our field of expertise. And that's two areas we see a lot of potential in saving costs.
And I assume that you also utilize some of the CloudWatch metrics potentially for some analysis.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way, yeah, if I'm just listening to you and reading between the lines, CloudWatch gives you a lot of data to work with. So sometimes you have to look, but there are tons of metrics to work with, understand what's going on. You have history to work with, so you can build your own models based on what you have. And sure. And by the way, it has a lot of extra functionality beyond even that. You can,
of course, yeah.
The alerts that I've mentioned, that's another functionality that is built into CloudWatch, so you can use that. Sure. The native tools are great on AWS, and you can use them for these kind of things.
From AWS perspective, I'll just very briefly mention that like we have different tools, and they will be used for different purposes. And we often get feedback from our customers that they would like to have like one tool to provide the ultimate recommendations across everything. It's a little hard to do it, because again, all customers are different. So that's why from AWS side, you will often find those tools, whether focusing on maybe purely cost visibility, or maybe some recommendations, particularly for like either compute or maybe storage. And and they will be embedded into services. Like let's say for S3, like storage lens. So that is, the kind of tool. So that's why from AWS side, like generally when we provide this kind of tools, it would be maybe some sort of custom solution. Maybe in case somebody's familiar, like cloud intelligence dashboards, Kudos dashboards, that's something that is built like on QuickSight service using your like cost and usage report. They help with like visualization and long-term kind of tracking of your cost optimization efforts. However, like we don't really have like one native AWS tool that will provide like recommendations across like everything, like absolutely all of your estate. But I think that maybe Omar can mention like what they do, at least at Zesty, how they can help.
Sure. I'll start by saying even before Zesty, we try not to be that recommendation system. We try to go to play the hard game of actually performing the action based on what we learn and kind of take action on the data that we have. But I can give you a great tip. If you go to, first of all, I think everyone here knows, but you have the FinOps Foundation and they have tons of data over there that you can learn from. If you go to GitHub and just search for the keyword FinOps, you'd find amazing tools you can work with, like Crane and the likes. Those are open source tools you can use to get those recommendations. Surely, if you're deployed on Kubernetes and systems like that, you can use the CNCF landscape and learn about tons of new tools. So I think there are great open source solutions. Regardless, we try to build on top of such solutions, gather the data, make our analysis based on the model that we have and perform the actions for you. We work in the commitment side and the storage side of things. So based on the data we have, we'll do the planning for you with like beyond recommendations. We'll perform the actions.
I'll provide a link on, like it's not like sort of AWS native tool, but it's AWS native solution. It's more from the kind of visibility perspective, it could be useful, but it's something that we really recommend customers, the cloud intelligence dashboards or Kudos solution. So we have like a well-architected lab that you can take a look and potentially install like a dashboard on your account from the either management payer account view to have like kind of dashboards across multiple services, multiple domains that will give you some sort of recommendations around what and where you could potentially save. So like I'll just share a link in the chat, but that's if you're specifically interested on like recommendations. So that could be like a really good one because it's quite comprehensive. I'll share a link shortly.
Sure. Thanks, Natalia and Omar, for sharing your views out there. Omar, I wanted to come back to you. How are you using AI-based tools to optimize resource allocation? Is that something that you could touch upon?
Resource allocation in what sense?
So basically wanted to cover some of the areas where you specifically, have automation planning, while you're considering the risks of commitments and making decisions based on models.
Yeah, so I hope I'm not repeating myself, but so in terms of, for example, managing commitments, right? So we gather data and based on what we have with the historical data, we try to analyze and forecast basically the risk. So it's kind of risk management, especially when we talk about costs. When you plan ahead, you want to decide whether you should commit for a 1 year period or a 3-year period. What is your risk in terms of not utilizing or not using the same kind of resources in a year's time? And that's basically what we do. We have a model that computes that. I hope that answers the question. We kind of do the same with storage by analyzing the trend of the data. So we look at metrics that I'm not sure if you can read. No, you probably can't read it with CloudWatch because that's specifically within the volumes themselves. So we look at trends of reading and writing, like IO operations within storage. And then based on that, we make decisions whether that should grow or shrink over time. And we reapply the same thing over and over.
Got it. Thanks. I want to be mindful about time. I know we have about 10 minutes more for our session out here. And I definitely wanted to come to Dina. Dina had a quick presentation to share about what Zesty does. And Dina, over to you. If you could,
sorry, can I just ask one very quick question before we move over?
Absolutely.
So question for Omar, I guess, or maybe Adina. So on your website, you have something called Commitment Manager, which, and I'm reading for the site, automatically adapts AWS RIs according to real-time infrastructure needs. So it basically says that it gives the full flexibility of on-demand with the discounted pricing structure of RIs. So how does that work across multiple accounts or just within a given account? Because that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, Ahmed, do you want me to jump in and
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah. So it can work across multiple accounts. As long as they're on EC2, we can. I mean, I'm jumping the gun here in my presentation, but yes, it can. Let's say you already have reserved instances or savings plans on your account. It can help cover that delta of workloads that you're struggling to cover on your own, so that you can scale those reserved instances as your application needs go up and down, like you would with on-demand. It just will deliver those discounts of reserved instances.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So on that note, I guess I'll just jump into my presentation. So what Zesty was born out of the challenge that we were identifying in the industry, that companies were often dealing with infrastructure that was relatively static, but there was constant change in the way their applications were used, how new features were deployed. Yeah, change was a given around everything in their infrastructure, except the infrastructure itself was static in the sense that you would purchase a commitment for, you know, a 1 year or 3 year period of time, and then it's impossible to change that commitment, which meant that often, you know, people were over provisioning when their workloads went down using a certain instance or in a certain region, or they were left paying on demand, you know, in circumstances when they didn't have enough discounts covering their workloads. And at the same time, you know, when you're provisioning new pods or nodes or storage or whatever it might be, the actual resources that you're using, be they, you know, CPU or RAM or, you know, the storage capacity, it's set in place in a static nature. And much of the time when they're underutilized, you have a lot of idle resources. And when they're overutilized, then you run the risk of, you know, application throttling or downtime or data loss. So the whole aspiration of Zesty was to really match the allocation of resource provisioning to the dynamic nature in which the cloud is actually used. And the way out was it was trying to support cloud infrastructure to be more dynamic. So we support the more efficient utilization of cloud resources, ostensibly making those provisioned amounts more scalable to what's actually used. We exclusively, on the commitment manager side, we exclusively use AWS most discounted commitments, which is standard reserved instances. Actually, of late, that's been updated to convertible reserved instances as well. But for the standard reserved instances, we also have the buyback guarantee, where if a user, if we have purchased a standard reserved instance on the user's behalf and it doesn't get used, we've put it back on the secondhand marketplace, for example, and it doesn't get sold, we will reimburse, effectively, the user for that reserved instance that didn't get used. So to do this, we basically have two solutions. We have Commitment Manager that automatically manages those AWS discount programs through the use of standard and convertible reserved instances. So this needs to be updated a little bit. And the machine, we have a machine learning algorithm that informs that increase and decrease of allocation. So the algorithm is identifying the usage history of how the application has been used in the past, identifying the peaks and troughs of usage, and then anticipating what future demand is going to be and making an accurate prediction of how much reserved instances are going to be required in the short term. And as the application evolves, that prediction model becomes more and more sophisticated over time, reaching a greater, close to, in some cases, almost 100%, coverage for workloads. So the Zesty, so for those who are already, managing, your commitments on your own, you've got your savings plans and your reserved instances in place, I think that Zesty can serve as a nice complementary solution for you, with its ability to help you tap up that amount of workloads that you're covering. Most people, what we see in the market is that they're successfully covering on their own 60 to 80% of their workloads. And what Zesty is really commonly used for is to top that up to close to 100% in some cases. With Zesty Disk, that's a solution that automatically manages the scale of block storage. We create a virtual disk that enables the file system to shrink and expand in line with application usage. So this also uses a machine learning algorithm as well to again analyze the usage history of the disk. It also looks at the metadata. It's looking at as Omar already mentioned, it's looking at the read and write and throughput, identifying what future capacity is going to be, and then develops an algorithm or a model which will determine what future capacity is going to be. And as you can see in the image here, it's scaling the storage. So everything that you can see above that orange line is the provisioned level, and that blue line reflects what the actual storage capacity was. So we leave a small buffer, and I'll get into more detail about how it works. But let's talk about Commitment Manager quickly. The way it works is that on their own, customers have a static allocation of commitments, which, depending on how their workload is behaving, at some points you have under-provisioned RIs where that are not getting covered, and other times you have over-provisioned RIs where you've purchased RIs that don't get used. So onboarding with Zesty, you get a view of your potential savings, of how much you can save. And once you've deployed, the Zesty algorithm kicks in, and it starts to scale straight away. Most customers see savings immediately, and it takes in just a few weeks, you can reach really optimal savings, where it continues to scale the reserved instance allocation to the workloads. And then you can see here a depiction of our buyback guarantee, where there's an amount over here that we've provisioned on your behalf that doesn't get used. So we will pay for those unused reserved instances on your behalf. So that acts as a certain level of insurance against being over-provisioned that users just wouldn't get if they were trying to obviously self-manage their discount program allocations. Zesty Disk is a fairly unique solution in the market. It works on elastic block storage within AWS. This is an example of an environment where they've provisioned 750 gigabytes of storage. And all this space in grey here is storage that's being provisioned and is being paid for, but doesn't get used. It's just sitting there fairly idle. What happens when deploying Zesty Disk is that we will start to scale that provision storage in line with the actual used amount of storage. As the algorithm identifies that there's going to be an upswing in storage use, it automatically provisions, adjusts the volume on, so that basically on the virtual file system that's been created, it has this ability to serialize the file system. The data gets moved across to the sections of the file system that are kept, and the section of the file system that is now empty just simply is removed and dropped in the case of a decrease. And then in the case of an increase, just more file system capacity is added to the serialized volumes. So in a normal situation, in a data peak, let's say you would be able to, it's possible to on your own increase the available storage capacity, and you might do so. And then you would be probably left with a level at around this point, just above the peak of the data ingestion point. And then you'd often just continue to pay for that amount of storage ongoing. So Zesty Disk's added value is that it can then automatically scale down the storage without requiring much human intervention. And in this, we leave a buffer to ensure that there's no risk or chance of ever running out of storage space. And it's based on an intelligent algorithm that continues to optimize and more closely match the provision to usage amounts. And then you can see here, all this storage now in orange is capacity that is saved. So a little bit about Zesty. We've been around for 4 years, thereabouts. We have over thousands of ops teams using our products. These companies are just some examples. You can find us on G2. We're leaders in the area of cloud cost optimization and cloud management. Our solutions are SOC 2 Type 2 certified, and are in line with with security and privacy guidelines. And we have a very close relationship with AWS that we're incredibly proud of. We've been certified as an advanced technology partner, and we also have a cloud management tool software competency.
Great, thanks, Dina, for taking the time out. I know that we have overshot our time by a few minutes. Open to run it for another couple of minutes if anybody has any specific questions that they'd like to ask. If you don't, then we can also, schedule separate conversations with the Zesty team as well, if you would like to have a discussion individually. Great, excellent. I'd like to thank each and everybody for taking the time out and spending through this valuable session today. We definitely will get in touch with you in case you would like to have a follow-up conversation with the Zesty team. Once again, thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.